Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another session with WesleyGuildSA. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today we have quite a well-read doctor who will be giving us more about monkeypox. As we all know, we've heard many talks of us going into yet another lockdown, and I can tell it's giving me anxiety, and I bet it's giving a number of us anxiety as well. However, before I introduce our well-read and I believe quite renowned, because now I've already read his bio. Let us bow our heads and open in a short prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you this evening to thank you for the day that we've had. We thank you for being able to wake up this morning, and we also thank you for being able to join in to today's sessions. Heavenly Father, be with Dr. Moyo as he shall be telling us more about this outbreak of monkeypox. Heavenly Father, we do not know how far it can get, and only research can tell us that you, oh dear Lord, know just how far this will get. We ask that you be with us, you guide us, and you protect us through this outbreak of the virus. And you just are a God, that the session be led by you, Heavenly Father. May your Holy Spirit be on our tongues, and may you be heard through ears that wish to learn more. And even those that shall watch the session afterwards, may they also be hearing and be of knowledge of what this outbreak is about and how they can protect themselves and what to foresee in the near future. In Jesus' mighty name I ask and I pray, amen. Welcome, Dr. Moyo. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to be with us and coming to teach us about monkeypox. Just a short brief on Dr. Moyo to all of our listeners and everybody watching from home. We have Dr. Sangiwe Moyo, who is a public health specialist. The doctor is a public health specialist with over 16 years of experience in managing donor-funded HIV and reproductive health programs in 10 countries across the Southern, Eastern, and Western Africa. He currently serves as the Africa Region Director at Final Mine Consulting. Dr. Moyo has collaborated with various stakeholders, including ministries of health, the CDC, USAID, United Aid, the World Health Organization, the International Labour Organization, and as well as international non-governmental organizations. He has led multiple teams across the multiple countries in public health initiatives. His contributions to outbreak and pandemic preparedness include the involvement in COVID-19 and HPV vaccination initiatives. He has completed a course of monkeypox, which is what he'll be sharing with us today, with the World Health Organization, especially focusing on the African outbreak context and enhancing strategies for the epidemic control. Dr. Moyo holds a Bachelor of Science and Honors in Nursing Sciences. He also holds a Master's of Business Administration as well as a PhD in Public Health. He serves as an adjunct lecturer of Master of Public Health students at the Foundation of Professional Development in Pretoria. Dr. Moyo, thank you again for your time. We are ears open. I'll be taking notes. I'm worried about going into another lockdown. I don't think any of us will be happy with that. So please do give us more information on what it is that we can expect, what it is that we don't yet know, and what exactly is monkeypox. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here and to be sharing what I've learned about Mpox. As you might be aware, the name changed, and also the name is transitioning fully from monkeypox to Mpox, but you might still see a lot of reference of monkeypox as this is work in progress. There are many reasons why it's actually changing. Part of it is because of some of the online abuses that were being connected to specific groups, with the name monkey. But also initially, the disease was discovered amongst captive monkeys in Denmark, but we have since learned that the disease is also found in other animals besides monkeys. So that's the context of like the name change and so forth. So really glad to be here, and thank you so much for reading my bio. And just a quick disclaimer as well. I'm going to be using WHO slides from the course that I've completed. I'm not representing WHO. I'm not an employee of WHO. I'm just acknowledging where I got the content. And this is like the most recent content that you would find. And also, I would encourage participants or anybody who's listening, who's interested in learning more about Mpox, the disease, and monkeypox, the virus. You can use the resources that are available from WHO. The courses are free, actually. So you can enroll on these courses and get some learning and discover more ways of how you can participate and help in controlling the current outbreak. Yeah, so yeah, big concerns all across the board. People are worried, is this the new COVID-19? Are we going back to lockdowns? What's happening? The quick answer to that, it's Mpox is completely different from COVID-19. We are very, very unlikely to head into lockdowns. But I'll get into as much detail. I hope you can see my screen. I have a couple of slides that I've prepared, and I hope these are projecting. You can confirm this for me, Bani. Okay, they are projecting. Perfect. So I think we'll get started with knowing where monkeypox comes from, the virus, how is it transmitted, and what are the signs and symptoms of the Mpox disease, and how can we differentiate it from other diseases that have, lesions or papules or mucus that come out, like your chicken pox and your measles. And also, more importantly, how can you stay safe? And also, how can we help health officials and authorities to get and stay ahead of the outbreak? And then I hope to spend more time answering questions. I hope to keep like this to like 10 to 15 minutes or so that we can spend more time interacting and getting to understand the disease. I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to that. All right, just some quick science here. So monkeypox comes from a family of viruses. They're called Pox Variidae, and they belong to the genus of orthopox virus. So it's the same lineage as your smallpox. So smallpox was a disease that we used to be in the world before it was eradicated by the year 1980. So WHO, this is one of the biggest successes in disease eradication by WHO. And this happened in the year 1980. And this was largely because populations got vaccinated against smallpox. But what has since happened is that, as you can tell, this is like more than 40 years ago. The populations that got vaccinated at that time, these people are over 40 or they're in their 70s, 80s, and so forth. And also over time, there's reduced immunity against smallpox. And also all the younger generations post-1980 have not been vaccinated or exposed as much. So that could be part of the reason why monkeypox is emerging, because of that immunity slowly fading away from the population overall. So monkeypox was first discovered amongst captive monkeys, and it was also then found in rodents later on. And the first case where it was observed in human beings, it was in 1970, and this was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'll give a little more context around the current outbreak and the epicenter that we have in Eastern Congo in the upcoming slides. But quite important to note that this is a disease that has been known for a long time. And I guess the audience might be asking questions as to why haven't we, advanced in making sure that we control in outbreaks or gotten more vaccines to the people that need them and so forth. So this is part of the challenge that we have globally in terms of equity. So diseases that occur in this part of the world, which is the global south, sometimes don't get enough attention. And also there is not enough funding to give scientists in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and West Africa for them to do further research. So you can partly blame that complacence on, you can partly blame this current outbreak on that, to say, the world relaxed around funding research around this disease and making sure that we know as much as we can and we have more tools to protect populations against it. So there are countries where it is endemic. By endemic, I mean where it's always there locally. There are always cases that are coming up. For example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they see high number of cases, like more than 1,000 of suspected cases since the year 2005. So time and again, there's people that are infected. But as you will quickly see, this is slowly changing now. And as you would know, we had an outbreak in the year 2022, and that affected about more than 100 countries across the world. And South Africa was one of the countries that was affected by that particular outbreak. And you would see a lot of infections happened directly because somebody who went or who was in the endemic areas traveled to new countries. But we also did see a lot of human-to-human transmission happening in the countries where it was popping up as a new disease. And that is what is most concerning. But also another added feature is that in the year 2022, we started seeing this disease more sexually transmitted, whereas in the endemic regions, it was more of animal contact or human-to-human, very close contact. So now there's a new connotation to the disease, which is the sexual transmission from human beings to human beings. But also other things that would be interesting to look at will be issues around deforestation that could be happening. As you would know, the Democratic Republic of Congo is has got a very dense forest in the tropical regions. And this is where the disease seems to thrive very well in tropical regions. So countries in Central Africa going to West Africa, where they have these climate conditions, which make it easy for the disease to proliferate. With deforestation, with men, logging and getting into forest to access those woods, they are getting into places where humans have not reached before, and therefore having more contact with animals in the forest, which might be reservoirs for the monkeypox virus. But also where we have the current epicenter for monkeypox, it is in Eastern Democratic Congo, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a conflict zone. Goma being the, one of the largest towns around that area. So that also, pushes people into camps, refugee camps, and also pushes other people to go and hide in the forest, running away from conflict, and then therefore more exposure to animals. And also when people are in the forest, they then eat animals that might be reservoirs or carriers of monkeypox disease. And of course, poverty, with people looking for protein sources, might then be killing these animals, skinning them, having contact with the skins, having contact with the blood, having contact with the animal where this virus might be harboring. And of course, what I've just mentioned, which is the cessation of smallpox vaccinations across the globe, could also be part of that. Right, so when we look at the current outbreak, you'd see that the Democratic Republic of Congo and Central Africa has a specific variant, or what you call a clade, which is clade 1. But then other countries in West Africa, like your Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, have a different kind of clade, which is clade number 2. And this clade is also what you see here in South Africa and Mozambique, and that's what we have experienced in 2022, which is clade number 2, and the more specifically clade number 2B. So this is a less severe one, clade number 2, but clade number 1 appears to be more deadly than clade number the one that we're currently experiencing here in South Africa. And this is what actually has caused a major concern globally, where we're seeing this now showing up in countries which had never had Mpox before. So now we're seeing countries like Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, which are adjacent to DRC, now having Mpox. And also the fact that the virus has changed slightly, and I'm sure people understand how viruses change, viruses change, and the issue of variants and so forth because of the experiences with COVID-19. A lot of people have been exposed to these medical terms. So that's where the concern is, in that this new clade number 1B, more specifically, is the one that is of major concern. And that is what is getting us very, very worried. And so as we speak right now, there's been like 15,000 cases of Mpox in Congo just this year. And also there's been about 550 deaths that have been reported. And of course, you would know that this is a conflict zone, especially Eastern Congo. So there might be more cases, and also a lot of people might not have been diagnosed or treated. And also, of course, more concerning is the fact that most of these deaths are occurring among children, and some of them, they die due to starvation because, the lesions that happen inside the mouth make it difficult for them to swallow and to eat. So at the end of the day, they end up dying, because these lesions are very agonizing. They're quite painful. So it's hard to eat anything if you're affected, especially in your mouth and in your gut system. Right. And also the fact that it has now crossed to like 13 countries across, and this has prompted WHO to declare it a global health emergency on the 14th of August. And in the South Africa context, there's been more than 24 cases that have been identified, of which I think close to 21 have been fully recovered, and about 3 cases passed away. But of course, this is evolving statistics, so these numbers can change. It could be a different figure as we're speaking today, as numbers get reported time to time. But I think there's reason to be raising more surveillance and making sure that we have more robust systems of detection, and also making sure people are staying safe. But there's no reason to be panicking. This is not a new COVID-19. It's a completely different disease profile. I think as we get towards the end, we'll speak more about what can be done in terms of measures to prevent. So the Eastern Congo, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and the neighboring countries, those are the countries with the highest risk. And that's where the disease is affecting mostly adults and spreading predominantly through sexual contact. And this is linked to clade number 1B. And then the second high-risk area is also within the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the disease has always been endemic and is affecting mostly children and is spreading through multiple modes of transmission. So I think the next slide will speak to a couple of modes of transmission. I'll expand a little bit more on that. Then other countries like your Nigeria and your West Africa and Central Africa and East Africa countries, where Mpox is endemic, and where it's affecting children and adults and spreading through multiple transmission modes. that could be regarded as a moderate risk. And what you're seeing there is clades number 1 and 2 in circulation in those countries. Then all countries in Africa, including South Africa and around the world, where outbreaks affect mainly men who have sex with men. So the outbreaks that we've observed in South Africa have tended to center around men who have sex with men. And they also tended to be already HIV infected and not on treatment, or they were on treatment and then dropped off. So that has led to severe cases of the disease. So instances where people have immunocompromised, the disease tends to have more severe outcomes, and hence the deaths that we've seen in South Africa seemed to be strongly linked to pre-existing conditions like HIV. Right. So this is in endemic areas, that is where the disease is localized or is there with cases coming up time and again in the countries. What we see is animals, people getting infected by the disease from animals. So I'll list the animals that have been found to be hosts of the monkeypox virus. So those are like your rodents. There are specific species of monkeys, squirrels, and in those specific endemic areas, there are people who eat or who consume these animals for meat, and also maybe they use their skins and other artifacts coming from these animals for different rituals, depending on the cultural context. But then what happens is the individual that would have had contact with the animals at their household or with their close contacts, they then infect other persons. But then how it gets out, it is through a person from this or who has had contact with this group, then travels to a non-endemic area. So it could be, your Norway, it could be South Africa, it could be any other country that would at that point not have had Mpox as being an endemic disease. So then through clothing, contact with clothing, or where a person who has sold their clothes and maybe the sharing of clothes, or the person who's doing laundry, or you come to contact with the clothes of a person who's been infected through droplet like through sneezing or coughing, and then the droplets land on the next person, and then through skin contact, that is direct touch to the person, and then through surfaces, so a person with the lesions which are actively shedding the virus, and you come to contact with that surface, that is another mode. And so this, in a nutshell, is how people can get infected with Mpox. So it is primarily a zoonotic disease. By zoonotic, we mean a disease that moves from an animal to a human being. I don't know if there's been cases of where the disease moves from human beings to the animals, but I'm sure with more studies and more data that could have been already established, or this is something that is going to be established over time. So these are some of the animals that have been found to be hosts of the monkeypox virus. So it is the sooty mangabey. It is a specific rodents, specific squirrels, and as you can see them, this is what has been identified, but it's not a full exhaustive list, as work is in progress to learn more. And as I've highlighted in the beginning, that with lack of funding to help scientists in these endemic areas to do more research, there hasn't been much uncovered over the past 40 years or so since the disease was uncovered. But I think with more efforts and more advocacy, there could be more work done to find probably the true reservoir or source of the monkeypox virus within the wild or the natural setting. So now, how does it move from the the human, sort of from the animal to the humans. So that is through close contact with the animal. So that could be through bites. So any of these animals that is infected bites a person or scratches that person, or the person gets in contact with contaminated material. So if there was something that any of these animals that is infected was holding, and then the person also comes to direct contact with the fluids or direct contact with the surface that has the virus itself, there could be transmission occurring. And as I mentioned, some of these areas where the disease is endemic, people do slaughter these animals for food. So people that do the slaughtering, the skinning, come into contact with the blood, with the skin, or any parts of the animal that is infected, or fluids from the animal, that could lead into infection or any of those animal products. Now, from person to person, it is largely through skin-to-skin contact, through prolonged face-to-face exposure, through kissing, through sexual contact. So this is the most common way that the virus gets transmitted from person to person. But also other uncommon ways is through linen and through clothes, and also through it entering through broken skin, through the respiratory tract or mucous membranes. Now, just quickly to show how the disease progresses once it's entered a human host, what you have is between 5 and 21 days is an incubation period. By incubation period, we mean the time when the person has had contact or has been infected, but the symptoms haven't started showing. So that is called the incubation period. So that period can last about 5 to 21 days. And hypothetically, it is feasible for somebody who is in, let's say, Eastern Congo, or let's just say Goma, which is one of the cities, the bigger cities in Eastern Democratic Congo, to arrive in South Africa within those days, 5 to 21 days. So it's hypothetically possible for a person to arrive and not be showing symptoms by the time they arrive in South Africa, except that it's, I think, almost impossible to do that because of the conflict there. So it's hard to move from that part of the region and like drive through a bus and or a vehicle and drive into South Africa, because there's rebels there, there's active conflict. You could potentially, and I think people would generally avoid situations where they might die along the way in doing so. So I think air travel gives much more exposure and much more potential for somebody to like walk in without symptoms. But I know there's strong screening, and the country has put very strong measures at all ports of entry to check for individuals that are coming from the epicenter, that is the countries that we have mentioned, where we currently have that strain of concern that is currently circulating. And so after between 5 to 21 days, there's a febrile stage. That is where a high temperature, that is where you have lymphadenopathy, so the lymph nodes swelling up. And those could be like your central lymph nodes or your armpits or your lower lymph nodes swelling up. And the next thing is a headache. I've listened to some patients, I think people that have been interviewed, they describe this very severe headache. And it seems to be a feature that comes out strongly. Then there's the feeling of hot and cold, chills. There's also a sore throat. There's body weakness. There's also exhaustion, the general feeling of exhaustion. So that happens 1 to 4 days after that incubation period. And then post the febrile stage, that's where the rashes start showing up. And I'm sure you've seen some of the images online or in other platforms where you see these various stages of rashes showing up on the skin. So that can take about 2 to 4 weeks And then the final stage is the recovery. So a lot of patients do recover from Mpox. Although the fatality rate can be about 10 to 11%, which can be regarded as quite a high fatality rate. Well, I would say a high fatality rate in the context of like a disease that has emerged now, but people do recover. Quite a lot of people do recover from the disease. The crusts, or the lesions, do leave some crusts. Some of those wounds could look permanent after the healing process, but the skin can generally regenerate and it would look normal over time. And there's no symptoms post that time. So now, in more detail, the incubation period, reiterating the fact that it's got no symptoms, and the virus may be present in the bloodstream at that time, but most likely towards the end of that incubation period, that's where it can be detected in the blood. And the second stage, which is the fever, the swollen lymph nodes, the headache, the chills, the sore throat, the body weakness, the tiredness, exhaustion. And then at this stage, the virus is in the blood, and there might be small lesions in the mouth, inside the mouth. And the next phase, which is the rash phase. So the virus may be in the blood in the early stage here, and the virus would be present on the skin. So the lesions that the person would have would be having the virus itself. So those rashes, when you open them up, the fluid that is in there would have the virus itself, and also the skin surface would have the virus in most instances. But at this point, the body would have started responding against the virus. So there will be antibodies that will be produced and which can be detected in the body. So now looking at how the rash would appear. So there are various stages that the rash can appear. So it can start off as a muco, which looks like that, as a flat thing on the surface of the skin, but then slightly rising up to become a papule, and then a vesicle. So a vesicle, the fluid will be clear. The fluid that will be inside there will be clear, but then as it progresses to a pustule, it becomes to fill up with pus. And then when that pus comes out, what you have is the crust. So this is an image that shows what the crust would look like. And this is what I was describing, that with time, this crust can fall off, and then the skin can regenerate to be normal. But in some cases, you can have permanent marks remaining. Then, of course, the final stage, which is the patient fully recovered, but the specific antibodies would be present in the blood, and there might be scars that remain on the skin. Right. So now, talking a little bit more about the South African context, the risk to the general population is quite low. If we're to go with what has been happening currently. But the risk towards men who have sex with men and to sex workers, it is moderate. So what we see in South Africa, I think for most of the cases, out of the 22 that we've seen, most of them have been men who have sex with men, who have some compromise of the immune system due to HIV. And some are people that were taking medication before and then they stopped doing so. Others are people who did not know their HIV status at all. So they are HIV positive, but had not tested for HIV before. And also anyone who has prolonged and close contact with a person that is infected is at risk. So that means any one of us who comes to close and prolonged contact with an infected person is at risk of acquiring the Mpox disease or being infected with the monkeypox virus. Okay. I think I will share these slides with the team so that you can have everybody accessing. And like I said, the course is free from WHO website. You can get there and learn more. I've just picked up a few slides to summarize. And I think that image shows how severe the rash can be. I have more slides that differentiate between monkeypox, chickenpox, and measles. So one defining factor, we'd see that the Mpox would tend to have more pustules or would have more of the rash on the hands and also on the legs, so on the extremities, but where chickenpox might have more on the trunk itself. So I think I have an image that demonstrates that. And of course, on the face gets affected like 95% of the cases, and 75% of the cases, it comes on the palms and also on the feet. Then the oral mucosa membrane, that is the lining inside your mouth, 70% of the times. And then in the genitalia area, about 30% of the cases. And then in the eyes, about 20% of the cases. And then in severe complications that can lead to blindness, like permanently losing sight. Then a major defining factor for Mpox is the swollen lymph nodes. And that's a distinct factor when you start comparing it to chickenpox and to measles and other diseases that have similar manifestations. So the major thing, which is here, what you see at the back of this image. Okay. So there might be other diseases that need to be ruled out when a clinical case is being observed. So there are other diseases that have similar manifestations, but the people in the clinic area would know how to make the differentiation. And as I alluded, you see here with chickenpox, there's more rash on the trunk and less of it on the extremities, which is your legs and your hands. But with Mpox, there tends to be more on the extremities. And also, the rash for monkeypox tends to be slow. It takes a little longer time to develop, like 3 to 4 weeks. But for chickenpox, it is more rapid. It shows up within a few days. And for measles, it's about 5 to 7 days. And then the major defining factor, which is the swelling of the lymph nodes, as I've mentioned. And, excuse me, the death rate can be up to 11% for monkeypox. And for chickenpox, it's quite rare for somebody to die out of it, though it can happen. But also for measles, it varies. It can be quite fatal. And then in some instances, the survival rate can be high. So now you can see from the images, that's an image of monkeypox and an image of chickenpox and an image of measles. So you can see the differentiation in manifestation there. And then, of course, another close-up image showing that. And more details around the differences between these three. I'm just rushing here because it's something that you shouldn't be too worried about. The people like in the clinical environment will be able to distinguish this. So a diagnosis for Mpox can be done through collecting fluid from the lesions themselves, and then packaging that for the laboratory to test it. The test which is most accurate is the PCR test, which is a polymerase chain reaction test that goes directly to check the DNA materials, which then confirm the presence of the virus from the sample that would have been collected. And of course, the professional people need to do this collection. So trained staff who would wear it, like your personal protective equipment, and carry out all the procedures before, during, and after to make sure that there's precaution around safety for safety against the transmission of the disease. I think I can close here. I'm just rushing to get to the questions and answers. I'm just curious to hear what people have in mind. And of course, individually, what you can do is to avoid close contact with persons that are suspected to be infected. In settings where, like, you have a case or you have a person that you have to take care of, you need to wear gloves, wear protective equipment, and to wash hands before and after caring for a person that is sick. Okay, I think we can go to the questions.
I think on my side, I am more relieved to hear that it's not a case of COVID-19, because I was ready to go to the shops and fight over some toilet paper and, try and get my essentials in place. But I'm more relieved that it's not another case of COVID-19. However, I did do a bit of reading on the WHO website just before we got into our session and during the session as well, just that I could see just how bad it's spread at the moment. And I saw that the numbers aren't as concerning, just as you've already mentioned. However, as soon as you hear fatalities, anybody does get worried at the hearing of fatalities. But does that mean that we should not foresee or anticipate a lockdown should it get into a similar space? Because in the same way that close proximity or close contact or prolonged contact with somebody that already has monkeypox, we could be infected as well. Now, in the same way with COVID-19, we just had a random man flying from Italy into South Africa, and next thing you know, everybody was, locked into their houses. So should we foresee, it could not be in the near future, it could not be this year, but could we foresee that should there be an inclination of people visiting prone countries or countries where cases of monkeypox are mostly heard or have alarming rates of monkeypox, should we foresee that we could get into a similar situation?
I would say most unlikely. I think the new added feature to this disease is the sexual transmission. I think that's what we're learning more about. So, of course, people would need to have the standard protections, and any close intimate contact can lead to transmission. So I'm just giving a pause there, thinking about people who have multiple sexual partners. Then you need to take you need to definitely reduce that or be very cautious. People that are HIV positive, they need to continue taking their treatment. I think when you are taking your antiretroviral treatment correctly and you have viral suppression, you like any other person who doesn't have HIV. So people that could be immunocompromised, making sure that they're taking their medication and they're consulting their practitioners. People in spaces like your female sex workers, they could have more exposure and they could be easily transmitting as well. And anyone else who comes to contact with a case would need to take precautions. There is a vaccine that is there against monkeypox virus. The same one that was used to eradicate smallpox is apparently very effective against monkeypox. But of course, there are other companies that have gone and developed more vaccines. But WHO, Gavi, UNICEF, and other entities that play in this space are working towards getting these vaccines to places where they are needed the most. So needed the most where you have active outbreaks and those communities which are immediately adjacent, or people that have had close contact with people that are infected. So that would be prioritized. So in short, it's unlikely that we'll all be getting a monkeypox vaccine. It will be in those regions and in those communities and those places where people are at highest risk of getting infected.
Okay.
I hope that answers.
It does. I feel greatly relieved, honestly, because I was worried. But another thing that now you've just mentioned, which was one of the questions as well, was about the vaccines. Now,
Yes.
a lot of people went out, rushed, and got 2 shots for that COVID vaccine. And I think the reason why I keep associating it so often with the COVID-19 virus is because of how a connotation has been made about monkeypox, or Mpox, as you mentioned, the new name. People went out and got vaccinations, and I'm just like, what if it was a chip that got into my body and now people can track me? Because I was one of the fortunate people who lived with people who were essential workers, and they would be out most of the days and they had to go and serve their country. My one sister did catch the COVID virus with the vaccine still. After having gotten the vaccine, I was lucky enough to not get the virus. So now I just want to know, in a similar case where somebody who did get the vaccine way ahead of the time, yet was still accessible to getting the virus, how does it then work? If you can just touch on the vaccinations and how exactly a vaccination works. Is it supposed to be something that is there to prohibit you from getting the vaccine, or is it just merely to help slow down the reaction of the virus, in the sense of you not having as bad a reaction while you get treatment?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And vaccines are different. So there are vaccines which would introduce like a live entity of the thing that you are being vaccinated against. There are some which would be like a attenuated or something that has been cooked. I'm just trying to find the words that people would easily cooked, as in like weakened or boiled, weakened, so that it's not exactly the entity itself in its full form. Or there could be something that mimics or looks like the actual entity that you're being vaccinated against. So there are multiple ways in which vaccines get vaccinated. But essentially, the whole mechanism is to train your body to fight against that pathogen. So in that case, if you're being vaccinated against monkeypox, we'll be training your body. Your body would learn how to fight that. So in the case where you have a real monkeypox infection, from whether from an animal or from contact with another person, what would then happen is that your body will be able to fight it better than an instance where you've not been vaccinated before. So that would lead to a milder disease or less severe disease or not disease at all. So I think that's where I think people got caught up to say, how come people who got vaccinated actually getting infected? We thought this was like, full protection and stuff. No, so in some instances, it leads to less severe disease. So where the outcome could have been worse than if you are vaccinated, then it doesn't become a worse case.
I hear you.
Yeah.
We have a comment from...
And also before that comment, just to add a little bit more, post-COVID-19, the way people view vaccines, people's mindsets have shifted because of like a lot of misinformation and disinformation. There are some mental models that have been introduced to people's minds to think that there's a bad vaccine and then there's a good vaccine. And I think that is now affecting how people make decisions around vaccines. We saw that in some countries, people were even stopping to get their kids immunized against like your vaccine preventable diseases that you know of, like for your children who are under 5, because they were starting to put in vaccines overall. And I think that is a sad new normal around vaccines. And every new vaccine that's going to come, and this is not a new vaccine, by the way, but I think in people's mindset, they might think, oh, new disease, new vaccine mindset. There's a couple of vaccines that are being introduced now, like a malaria vaccine. There could be a TB vaccine coming up soon, and so forth. But all of these vaccines that are coming to vaccinate against to vaccinate the adult population, they stand a chance of like being labeled and people being concerned, and then people are going to be questioning this, which would lead to some people being hesitant to getting vaccinated because of these models that have been introduced. And I promise you, even with Mpox, this could be early days, but you would see down the line, there might be a lot of misinformation, there might be labeling of groups, there might be stigmatization, there might be all kinds of theories that would come through. And some people, unfortunately, are vulnerable to this information because of the way it is spread. Like, people are very influential and who know how to speak and who know how to sway populations and use words that tap into people's biases, can just dispel this information, and people get trapped in this without realizing that information could be accurate. So I would recommend people looking or listening to their healthcare provider, going to good sources of information around public health information, like your WHO, your CDC, your NICD here in South Africa, your Department of Health. I think those are your safest areas. And unfortunately, these organizations also are learning how to use the social media space and use these communication tools that people now use, because you probably also didn't get your news from your mainstream channels today. You probably looked on X or looked somewhere else, right? So people are getting information from different sources than what it used to be 10 years ago. So us as public health specialists and all these institutions need to evolve now to find ways of using these spaces to effectively communicate risk. And I think that's something that is evolving now, and a big challenge for these institutions. And some of the people that work in these institutions were in my generation and older in some instances, so they're finding it hard to engage with these new tools. So I think that could be also part of the challenges that is being experienced now.
No, definitely, I agree. I mean, also with AI also being such an easily grasped, or something that's so close to people's reach, a lot of people can develop a lot of propaganda and start spreading false information, especially to the older generation, that they might even be afraid of this monkeypox. Whereas, in as much as we need to be careful with ourselves, we more so just need to be more knowledgeable about what's happening. You mentioned doctors. Okay, let me just quickly go back to the comment. Says Buki Wepea says that was an excellent presentation, and thank you very much for that. She's leaving here very much informed. We do have another question. How you spoke of the doctors, right? So now I want to know, how soon can one know that they caught the virus? Now, I know that you did mention it and you did give us a timeline with the different specs and what can happen, what the procedure is, not rather the procedure, but the different symptoms that the doctor can use to identify which disease you have in that very moment. But I just want to know, how often could it be that doctors can actually misdiagnose you, as this is more a matter of taking samples to the laboratory, and in as much as temperatures are also at play, it could be just a case of the swine flu with your fever, with the headache as well as the sore throat, or it could be some sores in your mouth from a cold sore, etc., etc. So how often can it be that doctors could misdiagnose monkeypox for a different type of pox, as well as how soon can I know that I've been exposed to somebody who might have just been around the same linen as somebody who comes from DRC, etc., etc.?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the PCR test like collecting the sample from the lesion and sending it to the lab, that's very accurate. It's like they can be, the chances of missing the diagnosis are very low. But also, your doctor is likely to ask a couple of questions, related to your exposure. For example, your occupation, the kind of job that you do, and whether there could be exposure that is related to your occupation. For example, maybe a healthcare worker who's having contacts with people that could be infected, or people that are working in like veterinary services, or people that that work with animals, and for just as an example. But there could be many. So I think we cannot unpack all of them right now. But I think your occupation, any exposure to wildlife or eating of bushmeat, any exposure to an ill person or person that had been diagnosed with monkeypox, any travel history, like if you traveled to near the epicenter or to any of these countries that have been mentioned to be, spillovers of this current outbreak, and also your vaccination history. If you've been vaccinated against the smallpox, like if you're that other generation, your chances are lower for you to catch Mpox, but also like laboratory persons. So laboratory persons, time to time, they would get specific vaccines because they work with different samples. So people in the lab could have exposure. And also, how long time ago did you get the last vaccine? All of those questions. So a doctor will be able to start an algorithm looking out to say, okay, if we're eliminating this, the chances are low that it could be Mpox, then it could be like chickenpox, or it could be another disease. So doctors will be able to work out very accurately, symptomatically, and also based on exposure, and of course, more accurately with the laboratory test itself.
All right. Nice. I think I'm just learning so much. I feel like I am ready to go and read more on the WHO website and actually do the course. But I just want to know, what can I get? Am I going to get a certification to show that I've completed the course? And also, what can I do with it? Because I'm not somebody that's in the medical field in any of my work. But I'm more than interested to know more. That way I can engage better with people of your expertise and just learn more. Because I think asking relevant questions puts you in a position to can learn more, as opposed to just asking vague questions about the Mpox virus.
Yeah. No, so yeah, when you go on the WHO website, you'll be able to get a certificate, especially the one which is an introduction to Mpox in the context of the African regions. I think you can contribute to like voluntary organizations, nonprofit organizations with your knowledge, help educate communities, like people's gatherings in churches, funerals, weddings, like, help people to be on the lookout, be vigilant around the symptoms, more hygiene, less hugging, less, I know culturally we are very hugging people, we are very
And the
handshake,
kiss to say hello, yeah.
like the kiss to say hello. So I think in the context where you have an active outbreak, it's better to minimize that. Like you're, sanitizing, washing hands before and after engagements, and thoroughly cooking meats, and all of those standard precautions would apply. But if you really wanted to contribute, one way is to like finding organizations in your community that can, the way you can be like help with educating. It could be voluntary. Sometimes they might give you stipend or enumerate you for that. But I think if you have a certificate for it, you have credibility to share your knowledge, or you could help with communication material, like work with organization working around risk communication, because you know your community best. So you'd know what would make sense, like going to co-creation spaces, like sometimes people who come externally to craft messaging for specific communities might miss certain nuances around those communities, and therefore not be able to effectively communicate. So with your knowledge and your understanding of your groupings, your communities, and the people that you engage with, you'll be able to help with the accurate information, because you have been empowered with like accurate information around Mpox. So there could be multiple ways, like it's practically limitless. And I
Okay,
mean,
but it just means
volunteer to organizations like Doctors Without Borders, Red Cross, and so forth, if you want to be on the front lines.
but I guess it just means I shouldn't go out there spreading false information
Absolutely.
about Mpox just because I do have a certificate from WHO. Oh man, I think I'm more interested now in joining Doctors Without Borders, because wow, I think a lot of doctors do a lot, and I thank you so much for your guys' contribution into the country and into everybody's wellness, into the world actually, because it doesn't just go into the knowledge, or rather the physical, that doctors do in hospitals or in health practitioner places, but it's also the knowledge that you're able to share with us, just as you're doing this evening, that puts us in a better place to look out for ourselves and also know what it is that we might be encountering and how we can deal with it. So thank you very much, Doctor, and to all the other doctors out in the world. In closing, final question, I just want to know, so that I can let you go and have time with your family. I saw that there's different cases and that one can actually recover and heal. What I do want to know, however, is whether, just like COVID-19, can it resurface once I've healed? Say, for example, I've gone through that entire time. I was diagnosed, I did fall ill, I recovered from it, a healthy recovery, or rather a full recovery, as some might say. Would it resurface again? Like, say, years later, should the virus now come back with a different strand or a stronger strand?
So we will be learning more about this disease. The chances are low, given the family of viruses where it comes from. So like people that were immunized against smallpox, like we were able to achieve eradication, complete eradication, because it didn't reinfect them, or they didn't get infected with smallpox at that time. So I think the vaccine is very effective, but also I think if you have been infected before, there's a low chance that you get reinfected, especially if it's a recent infection. There's a good chance that you won't be infected in the next couple of months or so. But that still needs to be verified. As I mentioned, we're still learning a lot about the disease. As more funding and more scientists get involved in this space. Yeah, I hope I answered you well. But also there could be other conditions, like some underlying factors, like which bring immunocompromise. That if the underlying disease is not under control, like let's say HIV is not under control, or any other thing that could lead to immunocompromise, or there's medication that the person is taking, maybe it could be chemotherapy or some steroids that they're taking, and a reinfection can occur. So there's conditions that could lead to. So there's no straight answer to say it's impossible to get reinfected. So there are conditions that could lead to that.
Nice. Thank you very much, Doctor. I think everyone should now know that if you are on any chronic medication, please do keep on taking your chronic medication, just so that we can be in a position of being healthier and having a stronger immune system, so that should you encounter a case of Mpox, your system can at least help in fighting this disease. Doctor, thank you very much for your time this evening. I hope you have a great evening further. And thank you very much to all our listeners from back home. Doctor has shared his contact details and has also mentioned that he will share the presentation for today. The session was recorded, so anybody can take this presentation, just look through it again and familiarize themselves with tonight's session. Thank you very much, Doctor. I hope you have a blessed evening till we meet each other again.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Doc.
Bye.
Bye.